so much for taking the time to meet with our group. I feel like we've met before. You look familiar to me. I'm Mari Saldi. I used to be with Housing California. I now work with an organization called the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. But we're here as part of the Corporation for Supportive Housing and Bring California Home Coalition Advocacy Day. We're here with over 100 people. We were out there at the Capitol steps this morning, really here to talk about homelessness, particularly the importance of continuing and ongoing funding for homelessness with a couple of key priorities. And so I'd love to have the group introduce themselves and just share a little bit about their component. I know we have some constituents too, and I'll give you some nice materials. Do you want to get started?
Sure. Hi, I'm Julian Crown. I'm a Research and Policy Associate with Housing Matters for Service Provider in Santa Cruz, the Assembly Members District. And I also grew up in the part of San Jose that is the part that's in the Assembly Members District. Yeah.
Thanks for making the trip.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, hi. My name is Maria Aguirre, and I am a housing navigator operating under this new initiative, CalAIM. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Wes White from Salinas, California Homeless Union, and I got a couple things for like an ID card maybe, just if they're signing up for cars, then they should be able to be afforded an address somewhere they can be, and you know, you have case manager go over there and mitigate the trash or whatever, you know, and but you know, people need to be somewhere 24 hours a day, and that's stopping the sweeps is my big deal.
And I'm Des Martinez from Fresno County. Was previously unhoused, but I now have a nonprofit that helps fill the gaps where the government has left off, and also boots on the ground advocacy work every day.
Hi, I'm Marcella Lohan. I'm a JV advocate and former foster youth. I'm also a resource creator for low-income families as well.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, and so part of why we're here is for the past really just a couple of years, as you probably know, the state has made some investments in homelessness, and that's after decades of underinvestment in the issue. And we've really seen huge impacts of the state's investments. For example, in 2023, we saw 70,000 people exit homelessness into permanent housing, but during that same period, over 180,000 people became homeless for the first time. So we're really seeing our investments make a difference, but we can't keep up with how quickly people are falling into homelessness and some of the persistent challenges. So that's really why we're here advocating for funding. We know that even though the state's in a budget crisis, this isn't something we can just fund in a time of surplus. We really have to make those commitments. And in particular, something we wanted to lift up for the Assembly member is one of the bills that CSH is co-sponsoring is specifically looking at older adult homelessness. The bill is SB 37, and it does have a small budget ask attached to it, which would create rental subsidies for older adults experiencing homelessness, who often have a fixed income. The cost of housing is going up, but people's incomes are not. So this bill would help fill in that gap for older adults specifically, because we know that that's the fastest growing population of people experiencing homelessness. But also, yeah, just wanting to talk a little bit about ongoing funding at scale. And I think Des and Julian can share just like a little more context, both about why the older adult ask is so important, but just really about the need for ongoing funding. I don't know if you want to start, Des.
Yeah, I'm gonna hand this your copy.
Thank you.
Okay, so hello, my name is Des Martinez from Fresno County. In 2015, I was compelled to leave my residence due to domestic violence. Following the prescribed protocol, I reached out to law enforcement, filed a report, and sought refuge in a domestic violence shelter. Regrettably, the shelter was unable to accommodate me, leaving me with no choice but to spend nights on the streets exposed to fear, trauma, and further abuse. This distressing experience led me to return to my abuser. During this experience, a passion ignited within me to advocate for safe havens for women and children. Over time, my advocacy expanded to encompass broader issues within my county. I have established a nonprofit organization, initiated a homeless union, and nationwide advocacy to combat homelessness, hunger, and champion for the rights of housing and Medicare for all. Today, I'm considered an older adult with disabilities and have very low income, can result in myself experiencing homelessness again. So today, I urge you to support SB 37. I have personally seen numerous older adults facing illness, injury, and diseases. It is essential to safeguard ourselves from the mental, physical, and emotional abuse experienced while being unhoused. Unfortunately, the numbers of deaths in California streets is increasing yearly. In Los Angeles alone, 900 unhoused individuals passed away on the streets, highlighting the severity of the issue with just in one county in California. In 2022, approximately over 100,000 individuals experienced homelessness in California, with 47% of them aged 50 or above, which equates to the estimate of 53,000 individuals spending the nights on the streets or tragically lost their lives on the streets of California. 1.2 million individuals in California depend on SSI, comprising 580,000 seniors and over 100,000 children with disabilities. Consider the potential increase in homelessness figures next year and in the next 5 to 10 years. Having an affordable place enables individuals to afford essentials like medication, food, gas, or bus fare for appointments. It also ensures that they don't have to worry about utilities being shut off, staying warm, or falling behind on rent. Even a single late payment can accumulate, potentially resulting in evictions. Evictions for seniors and individuals with disabilities can sadly lead to homelessness. I will never forget January 2018. I was driving down the street in the early AM to pass out hot chocolate when I seen an elderly woman lying on the ground with no blanket at all. I pulled over immediately to see if she was okay, only to touch her and found out her body was frozen. I called 911 immediately. I was in shock and I didn't know what to do. I was staring at somebody's grandmother that died right here on the sidewalk. When the ambulance got there, they reached down to take her vitals, and that's when her eyes moved. Nothing else on her body moved but her eyelids or facial expressions. It was just her eyes that moved themselves. That's when the medical team went to go pick her up off the ground. She was so frozen to the ground, it sounded like Velcro being ripped apart. I then knew at the moment that she still had life in her. I sat down on the bus bench when they drove off with her, thinking about how much pain she suffered all night, freezing almost to death, just because she had no place to live. Today, I still don't know if she made it because of HIPAA. The hospital wouldn't allow to give me any information. This is something traumatic I will never forget. This is not the first body I have seen deceased on the streets of Fresno or the last. I urge you once more to endorse SB 37. You possess the authority to effect this change. Let us collaborate in striving towards a future where no soul is left to perish in the cold or on the dark streets.
Oh my gosh, is this her?
No, that's a lot of the elders that are still striving to fight for their lives on the streets of Fresno right now. So they're all still elderly, disabled people on our streets right now. So this is a sample of people that are just sitting outside shelters waiting for housing or even a shelter bed. But unfortunately, the shelters now are stating that the elders with disabilities are a risk to their insurance. Their liability is what they tell them. So they'll spend 30 days there and then they push them out to the streets because they're considered a liability. So we have older adults now in California dying on our streets because of this.
Wow, this is such a powerful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I can just share like our experience from a service provider's perspective in trying to help people who are out there on the street, and kind of how ongoing funding and then specifically this bill would relate to that. So as far as ongoing funding, like homeless services providers, we are not revenue generating entities. We don't create money, so we entirely rely on the state and charity and just government grants in order to provide the services that we have. In any other organization that's responsible for huge expenses, they can predict what they're going to take in as far as revenue and make smart decisions based off of that. We don't know what to predict because all we know that we can predict is that funding will not be stable based off of everything that's happened so far. And that makes it very hard for us to do things like scale up teams that provide specific services. For instance, like a team that's specifically working with the elderly, a team that's working with street services. It also makes it very hard for us to try and scale up our staff and provide our staff meaningful career advancement opportunities. Because of course, like how can you offer opportunities if you don't know that you'll even have the money to pay staff because you don't know what the state's going to do the next year. So for us, ongoing funding is a way to really scale up all of those things and be able to make a meaningful impact and expand our services in that way. And then as far as thinking about SB 37 and rental subsidies, our housing authority is like, there is no wait list. There hasn't been a wait list for a long time. It is very hard to get vouchers. Like we are oversubscribed by far. We need vouchers to make it possible for people to afford their rent. We know from our latest point in time counts that the elderly are overrepresented in the homeless population in Santa Cruz. They're also overrepresented in San Jose, which I know is part of the constituency for this office. In order to make a difference in that, like, we need to have resources that are going to help people find housing. And rental subsidies are one of the most cost-effective ways to ensure that somebody doesn't fall into homelessness and gets out quickly. And so this being a bill that pilots that provides us an opportunity to show evidence that is something that works and that provides that pathway into stable housing, out of homelessness, is just like it's a no-brainer idea. So.
Who is authoring the bill?
Senator Caballero is the author, and the bill has passed the Senate, so it's on the Assembly side. It's a 2-year bill, and so it would be amazing if Assemblymember Bellerin would consider coming on as a co-author to the bill. That would be really powerful, and just any support. I know probably being on the Appropriations Committee is a stressful place to be in a budget like this, but just really prioritizing these resources to keep people safe, to really keep these services going is critical. Any other questions, or do folks have anything that we missed?
I did space on something I was going to say. Okay,
Yeah.
so just like thinking about, the other implication of not providing, a pathway into housing for people who are elderly is that for shelters and service providers, the way we have to prioritize like who's getting help, we're of course paying attention to their needs and how dangerous it is for them to be left on the street. And so what happens is, we prioritize getting housing to people who are elderly or getting shelter to people who are elderly. And the consequence is that we don't have enough shelter for everyone else, including people who might be like able-bodied and need less help and cost less to help if we can get them into a shelter, but we don't have shelter space because we didn't provide an exit to permanent housing for the elderly. So it's not just about the elderly, it backs up the entire system and really increases the cost.
And maybe not make us fight over funding, in our grants and funding, they put in, you can use it for outreach, you can use it for admin fees, you can use it for rapid rehousing, or you can use it for permanent housing. And it seems that every provider, they always choose outreach, they always choose admin fees, they always choose something that's gonna keep the money within that organization. We need permanent housing, and with permanent housing, we can start with tiny homes. The elderly really need a lot. We have too many elderly out there on the streets. And another thing is to oppose 1011, because if we don't oppose 1011, just these 4, 5, 6 people that you have on there, they'll be forced into areas in our city that are not safe for them. They get abused. They're the easiest to abuse, the easiest to steal from. They're having their disability cards taken from them, all the money withdrawn where they have to suffer, or people are getting them hooked on drugs because they don't have a pharmacist that delivers out to the streets. So by building affordable housing, not just affordable housing because it's only affordable to some people, by building low cost, 30% at their rate, because all older adults have fixed income, 30% of their rate. Maybe tiny homes, start with tiny homes that are ADA compliant, because a lot of our buildings that we're building are not ADA compliant. We have more people out here with disabilities than ever before. And then some of our buildings that we're building, our shelters only have 1 or 2 rooms that are ADA, which makes the individuals not be able to be accepted inside.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just a lot
it's
of
crazy.
navigating the scarcity just makes everything more complicated, right? But
Yes.
thank you so much for taking the time
of
to hear
course,
us out,
thank you.
and for your boss's leadership on these issues.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into the Caballero bill.
Okay.
And I'll share this.
Oh, that's your
give this
copy.
back. Oh, okay,
Yep,
thank you.
that's her
Thanks so
copy.
much for putting it out, and
Yeah.
it was
Yes.
a really powerful story again, so.
Thank you very much.
Hi,
I'm Des Martinez.
Uh-oh.
How
Good to see you, sister.
doing? Good to see you.
Please.
Hello.
They're bouncing.
Yeah, they're nice though,
I
aren't
didn't
they?
expect to like, I have a little folder for you too.
Got a little bounce there, huh?
I know.
Hi, everybody.
I'm Julian, nice to
Walking
meet
around.
you.
Thank you.
Hola,
Walking around.
Maria Aguirre.
Mucho gusto.
Well, so thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us.
Oh, happy
Can
to.
have a chair.
We are representatives of the Corporation for Supportive Housing and Bring California Home here for Advocacy Day with over 100 folks from across the state. And all of us work in different ways to prevent and end homelessness in California and are really here as part of sort of like a big push around the importance of ongoing funding at scale for homelessness, which of course I know you know the importance of, and also a couple different kind of key initiatives that address certain particular crises in our homeless crisis here in California, including older adults experiencing homelessness. But maybe before we jump into it, we can just do a round of intros and folks can share who they are, sort of like what connects them to this work. And I'm Mari Castaldi. I work as the Director of State Housing Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is a DC-based organization, but I work here on state policy in California.
Wonderful.
Let's go this way.
I'm Marcella Wilhelm. I'm a JV advocate and former foster youth, and I'm also a resource coordinator for low-income families.
Cool. Wes White from Salinas, California Homeless Union, and just stops the sweeps.
Joaquin Arambula. If I could have a few minutes at the end, I'd
Oh,
love to share some of the housing bills that we're working on as well.
Yeah.
Des Martinez, Fresno update.
And huge advocate that we need for our community and very appreciative.
Thank you.
She's
And I got
loud and
my
proud.
award from you.
That's right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Julian Crown, I'm a policy and research associate with Housing Matters. We're a services provider in Santa Cruz.
So, hi everyone, I'm Sana. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a legislative aide here in Assemblyman Burbando's office. I staff a variety of things, but the most relevant ones, the most important ones really to me are human services and housing.
Nice.
My name is Maria Aguirre, and I am a housing navigator with West Fresno Family Resource Center. Yolanda
Yolanda
Randos. Yolanda
yes.
Randos. So once again, I'm working under CalAIM, this new state initiative. So I'm fairly new. I'm a fairly new navigator with for housing. So I did Child Protective Services for 5.5 years with Fresno County. So housing is new, but I'm learning. But I'm here to serve the community.
Well, and as we talk about that, we've worked hard on CalAIM over a number of years to bring healthcare dollars into the housing space. And so the proposal by the governor to allow for transitional rent up to 6 months really allows us to see how we can focus on keeping people healthy, which means keeping them housed,
Yes.
right? Starting there. Do want to mention, you talk about older adults
Yeah.
and HomeSafe has threatened a program we were very instrumental in working on. Believe it's important for us to look at data, which will help us to drive policy. And we see that it's our older Californians who are becoming homeless more. And so we had a very specific program that was there to help them out with HomeSafe. And unfortunately, that's being targeted this year within the budget discussions.
Right. Yeah. We know that a lot. I mean, it's been pretty remarkable to see just in the past 5 years, after really decades of the state not playing much of a role in housing and homelessness funding at all, we have seen some major investments. And the key now is to make sure that those aren't just when there's a surplus
That's right.
or when there's, you know, the extra federal money, that we really make those committed investments. And for example, one of the things that we found is in the fiscal year 22-23, we actually saw 70,000 people exit homelessness into permanent housing in California. And during that same period, 180,000 became homeless for the first time.
Wow.
So it's really remarkable, actually, and that trend has been going up. In 2021, it was around like 60,000 people, 65, 70. So the increased investments really has been making a huge impact. But we also can't keep up with how many people are falling prey to increased housing prices, to fixed incomes. And yeah,
Well, if we
that's,
can prevent them from becoming homeless because we addressed the fraud and abuse that happens to our elders,
right,
we don't have to then create a system to rehouse them.
right.
And we should allow them to age in place and have dignity with where they're aging. So I'm aligned.
Yeah, oh, I know, we know you are. And I don't know, I know that you have been talking a little bit about like navigating CalAIM, and what some of the great things are, but also some of the limitations. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about like what you're seeing.
Yeah, so we are fairly new providers under CalAIM. So some of the challenges are the lack of affordable housing or low-income housing, because like every day, I kid you not, I receive like several calls a day of families looking for housing, you know, in tears, crying, hey, I'm exiting, I'm leaving the hotel that the County of Fresno is providing for us, and at the end of the day, I don't know where am I gonna take my kids. Most likely it's gonna be out on the streets, sleeping in their vehicles. So yes, we are able, I believe CalAIM has a good idea behind it. However, if there's a lack of low-income housing,
That's right.
I have a huge caseload, but there's no, where am I exiting these families to? If there's no housing, there's no affordable housing or low-income housing, like Des mentioned it.
Well,
Because affordable housing could be affordable for some people, not affordable for other people.
And I will just say, we need to make sure that the housing that they're provided is quality too.
Yes.
That it's not substandard, because we have issues in Fresno and we've
Oh,
been
yeah.
working hard to address it, right?
Yes.
But it can't just be price point, it has to be habitable.
Yes.
I
Right.
agree with you.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can't just throw them in something that's falling apart already,
That's right.
and it's not ADA compliant.
Right.
But we do take a lot of stuff just because.
What other options do we have sometimes?
Exactly.
But that leads towards needing to build and to make sure that we have the supply. Now, I will mention hyperlocal, sorry if I'm.
It's okay, it's okay.
In Fresno, we just secured $250 million commitment from the state over 3 years. We received $50 million of it, there will be $200 million more in the next 2 budget cycles. It was really driven towards downtown Fresno and to help us to address the housing crisis. Now, what I'd like to make sure is that we bring in affordability to that discussion. So as they're developing those new housing units, they're anticipating 10,000 new housing units in downtown Fresno. Where the new high-speed rail station is, within 2 miles around it, they're gonna be building up. How do we make sure that it's our communities who aren't pushed out when that type of development occurs? We're one of the last few affordable places in California to still build. That then means others will be looking towards us as an ideal place to come to. And we know what happens to our communities if we're not a part of those discussions as they're building it. So I would just encourage us as those next 2 years, as those plans are starting to be rolled out, that we figure out how to make sure affordability is top of mind for them. Second, it was really to help with water and sewer infrastructure, which lowers the cost of producing housing, which should help overall for the area, for us to start to produce more housing as you're speaking about. And then I'll stop, sorry.
Well, and I think like a place where we've really seen the impacts of state funding in particular and ongoing funding is in the HAP program, which has been sort of the flagship homelessness program. We did something kind of unique, which is a 10% set aside for youth. And if we think about other populations that are at high risk, particularly youth coming out of foster care, and we've seen, while we've seen the overall population of homelessness increase, youth homelessness in California has actually decreased by 21% just over a few years, which is kind of a testament to like that set amount of funding year over year really making a difference. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about some of like your experience as someone coming out of foster care and how those resources have been helpful.
I'm Rosella Wilhelm. I'm a former foster youth. I was also a student at American River College, but I unfortunately had to drop out because housing is more important than my education at the time. I was a part of AB 12, which is basically a SILP funding that helps you for 3 years. And I aged out at 21, which was last year. And I was attending school. I was doing it, trying to push education because it's so important to me and I wanted to graduate. I had 2 classes left and I had just left AB 12 in May, and I had my emancipation fund, and I soon ran out of that because I was not getting enough work hours. I ran through my emancipation fund, and I could not afford my one-bedroom apartment that was $1,650. I'm just one person, and I was not given the tools and resources I needed to manage my money. I knew nothing about building credit. I knew nothing about having a bank account at all. They did not teach me the tools I needed to become successful when aging out, like they said they were. When I asked for help, hey, can I please have help opening a bank account? Can I please have assistance getting my social security card, birth certificate, for these things? The answer was no. We're busy. We have other caseloads. There's more youth that are more crisis than you. And I was like, oh, well, okay. I was very blessed when Lutheran Social Services stepped in. They're a huge nonprofit organization that specializes in youth aging out at 21, which is me. I will be 22 this year. And they helped step in the best they could. They assisted me with rent assistance for three months, and then they had to cut me off because they were low on funding and other youth needed resources. And I'm scraping by the best I can, and I feel like housing is the biggest issue in California. It's the biggest issue, I feel like, almost everywhere, but I know California is at a huge deficit with funding, helping youth, helping homelessness. There's so much. But this is a more vulnerable state, as well as youth. There's seniors. There's so many people's moms, dads, sisters, brothers that have nothing to turn to. And I was almost unfortunately one of them. And I'm lived experience that I survived something very traumatic in my life, and I'm still trying my best to scrape by and kind of ignore these things and advocate for myself and other youth, because we all have a voice, we all deserve to be heard, and I'm more than proud to be a JBay advocate and advocate for us youth. I'm more than proud to be an advocate for low-income families and saying, hey, please listen to us, please, our needs need to be met, we're human, we deserve everything that everybody else has. We deserve to have secure housing. We deserve to have the funds. So I'm here to ask, please help us. We need it more than anything.
I'm really impressed. So first I'll say we need more people with lived experiences who are able to speak to the real impact that these programs have.
Yes.
And it takes real courage to be able to do that. And so I'm just appreciative, right, that you're able to be vulnerable and to come into a space to have these conversations. It's impacted me. So last year when SILP was being discussed, we had Ebony come, another foster youth with lived experience, come and testify before our committee. I haven't forgotten her, right? I think when we hear those types of stories, they really impact many of us, and it leads us to wanting to make change. Again, unfortunately, I promoted it last year through our budget, but the extra funding for SILP didn't get included for high-cost counties as it should. Because we're not a one-size-fits-all. Rent in other parts of our state might be less, so the transitional funding might help a little bit more. And we should have done more and can do more, because you need to continue to pursue higher education.
Yes, I'm almost done. 2 more classes.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Because it's like, I don't want to put myself through that again, and I think I can testify for everyone in the room that housing is literally our life. Housing is everything. And I just am so passionate about this. I'm on the SILP funding for JBay because they want to, decrease SILP funding and get rid of it.
Advocates for Youth. Sorry,
Yes.
I just want to make sure
Yes.
I'm sure you knew.
And it's just offensive and absurd that they want to do this to us. Not these cuts, not these youth, not anything to anybody at all. We didn't ask to be put in this position at all. And it's just very offensive that we even have to have this discussion. It's come on.
Well, and if we want better results as a state, if we want to make sure that we're investing into our communities, you have to make sure that every child matters. And that's where actually spending these dollars are incredibly effective for us. And it's why I'm so excited to see how we can partner together.
Yes, I'm very excited. Thank you for listening.
Happy to.
Yeah, so, as much as you can do, even through this tough budget year, to really prioritize housing and homelessness funding for these programs. Also, we really need to find an ongoing source of funding.
That's right.
We can't have this be sort of year by year, so would love your partnership on that. SB 37, which is a bill around older adult rental subsidies to address some of these issues, is on the assembly side. We would love to see you co-author it.
Who's the author and where is it?
Caballero.
Okay.
And I believe it's in approps on the assembly side. Now
Okay.
it's a 2-year bill. And there's a small budget ask of 25 million attached just to kind of get the program going, but it's something that can really align with CalAIM and some of these other programs to provide the rent subsidy, which is often the piece that's missing. Even with like transitional rent coming through Medicaid, which is really exciting, 6 months, especially for older
It runs
adults
out.
on a fixed income, is not gonna cut it, right? It needs to be that longer term support. And then lastly, also in the packet is we're really concerned about a bill SB 1011 that's currently on the Senate side. It would make it a crime to be homeless across
God.
the state. And it unfortunately has bipartisan support. And so it's really, we wanna just name that even though, you know, we've seen the impacts of investing in the right solutions, so we can't turn to just doubling down on the wrong solutions, and criminalizing homelessness is something that just makes it worse, so.
Work in Fresno.
Right, exactly, so.
Who's the author of that?
The author is Senator Jones, and Senator Blake Spear is a co-author on it.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll keep our eye out.
thank you so much. Anything that I missed, y'all?
If I can talk about two
Yeah,
then?
yeah, please
I'm gonna bring up 1840 and 2240.
do. Okay.
And look, I'm just gonna start by representing my community. I don't just stand up for the people who can vote for me, I also stand up for our undocumented community who oftentimes don't have representation. Now, they have the same dreams of being homeowners and staying housed, that we need to make sure that those vulnerable populations are addressed. So 1840, we have a dream for all down payment home loan assistance program that we want to make sure we're extending to our undocumented immigrant communities who have ITINs or social security numbers and who can qualify for a loan. That's a big step. Those who have been paying taxes and have a credit score and are able to qualify for a loan, we should be able to encourage and have them set some roots here in our state. And so we're looking to do that within 1840. 2240 is more focused on farm worker housing specifically. I'm not sure if you're aware, the migrant farm worker housing program requires you to move 50 miles away each year, and you can only stay within the farm worker housing for 270 out of the 365 days a year, 9 months out of the year. So we're running a bill this year that is co-authored by Speaker Rivas that would remove both the 50-mile requirement and allow those who are in housing to stay housed, rather than having to move further away. We have one of those farm worker housing projects in Parlier, right, just south of Fresno. And what we've found, if I can just be fair about it, the demographics of our farm workers who are migrant are changing. It used to be single adults. Well, now it's families. And those families have kids who are in school that we disrupt when they have to move 50 miles away. They don't have stability in their lives, and so we're looking to create that. And so if there's any way you guys could support either of those, I just wanted to put it on your radar.
Definitely, you know, I'm in support. We had out there past Raisin City, I don't know if you know that compound that was out there, they were all farm workers. And it was totally destroyed. They just took the bulldozer, ran over everybody's shanty. Because they actually were out there long enough to make shanties and stuff, not tents. They were actually shanties and.
Is this La Perla?
Right outside Highway City.
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
It was like, there were so many farm workers and their families. They just went in there and they just bulldozed the whole area and stuff, so we never knew, because I got with Gloria on that, and it was just awful, and I never know where they went or anything like that. And then plus we have the undocumented that are coming in. I have children sleeping on the street right now, and I can't get them into even a shelter, let alone
Because
a
of
motel.
size, right?
And it's sad. It's getting.
Tell me about the kids a little more. You said they have parents, are they on?
Yeah, they do have
Okay.
parents. So I'm getting calls from people that know that they were, I guess they put them at Fresno Rescue Mission. And so their time is up, or I don't know what happened, if they were only there for a couple of nights, or they can't stay there during the day. But parents are people in the community, I should say, are calling and saying, hey, Des, like, we have these undocumented, they were at Fresno Rescue Mission, now they're not there no more, they're sleeping outside, like, what do we do? So, of course, I'm calling the council members, they're like, we can't do nothing. And I'm like, well, aren't we paying for them to stay somewhere? And they were like, nope.
Aren't they paying taxes and not able to receive services
Yeah.
generally?
Every time
Sorry,
you
I'm
buy
in a
something
different
from a
frame of
water
mind.
bottle, like they'll say, the unhoused, they say they're not taxpayers. I said, no, we buy stuff from the stores, we're taxpayers.
Sales
If you
tax.
purchase something, you're a taxpayer, you're paying taxes. So we're all taxpayers, no matter what, poor, rich, poor, or anything.
Our income only allows us
Yeah.
to do certain purchases, right?
I mean, who wants a $4 thing of water? But the children, it's getting to be a lot. I work with Massig a lot and Amina, and it's getting to the
Bless her
point.
heart. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, she's quitting.
Mm.
So I'm pretty sure that was a hard job to fill, especially with Des being an advocate over kids.
But you're
Because
pushing.
I go
You're
really hard on
unapologetic about
Mastic
it,
now,
right?
because the county is getting so much money, our counties get money, but our city is doing more than our county is, and it's sad, because when I call and I say, you told me no kid would be left out on these streets, and now I have kids left out on the streets, but you're at home. I was like, you messed up by giving me your phone number.
It's a local thing, but one of the arguments I'm hearing is that he's wasting money on pursuing
Yes.
the whole S Valley, the Yopis
Yes.
Valley issue we have.
Yes,
And using his office budget for
yes.
that. Well, shouldn't he be focused on housing kids? And, you know, it's nice
Well,
when you can be
he's
like, you
gonna-
wanna spend money here.
You know what
But
I do
you're
to
not
the
gonna help us
city?
here?
I don't think he's ready for me at the county level. I really don't, because I told Miguel, I was like,
Butterfield?
yeah. I'm ignorant if you ask him. Bredfield, he said, Bredfield's one of our city council members. He says, I'm the most ignorant person there is in Fresno.
Oh my goodness.
And he said it at city council too,
Oh,
so I got it on
nice.
record. I was like, how nice. But I wanted to leave this with you.
Okay.
Because I want you to read it, because I don't think you have enough time. We can talk forever about everything, and I know, thank you so much for seeing us. I was like, Donka's here, because I was like, last time, and I didn't call you. I'm sorry, I should have called and said, hey, we'll be there. But I want you to read
We
this.
make time anyways.
I know, I gotta meet with you in Fresno, but I wanted you to read this, and I want you to look at the pictures, because these are the pictures that if 1011 goes through, these are the pictures of the people that we will be picking off the streets, off the sidewalks, the elderly. The ones you see in the wheelchair, the ones that are kicked out of the shelters, because the shelters say that they are liability to their insurance, so they cannot have people in walkers and wheelchairs. It's a liability now. So I want you to look at those pictures. These people are still alive. So I'm asking you to read the story, look at the pictures, and think about what's gonna happen if we don't oppose 1011. If we don't go and push SB 37, and if we don't get continuous funding in order to keep these programs that are working, stop the pilot programs. It works, let's do it.
1011 has a long way to go before it gets to us. I don't expect that.
Okay,
to
good.
cross the
Yeah.
finish line, but I.
Well, that's a good coming
Right.
story for like in a year or two, I guess, when it comes.
Last time we talked though, how's your son doing? Is he
Oh
out
my
there?
gosh,
Sorry, I'm just
so,
trying to-
yeah, no, I finally found one place, so it was bad, because he done relapsed twice. He's done every single rehab in Fresno County.
Maybe cycling.
And yeah, and it's bad because the drugs are in. The
Yeah.
drugs are in the rehab. So we finally found a sober home way out in the country by going to Kerman, right?
Oh.
But he likes it because it's out there and he's not quick to get to anything. But there's no NAAAs, there's none of that. It's like $650 a month plus $250 for food. And I have a sponsor right now for about 6 months for him. But other than that, I'm still looking into opening up our own, because we don't have anything for LGBTQ, let alone Black and Brown Pride or sober home livings, where the sober home he's at, he relapsed twice because people came to the sober home with the drugs. So I'm like, where can we go where there's
Where's
no
the safe
drugs?
space right.
Yes, where's a safe place? So we have to create our own.
Last time, I'm not sure I mentioned Jennifer Cruz. Are you familiar with that name?
No.
She runs the EOC.
Oh,
LGBT.
Jen, she ran,
Yeah.
huh?
She ran for supervisor against MagSig. Well, she's a strong advocate for our LGBTQ community. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
to connect you and her if there's.
Well, I think that's why I kind of want to start
Just
our
thinking about
own with
yourself,
the
right?
Black and Brown Pride, because in Fresno, you know how sometimes things get a little, so that's the way we've been feeling over there with EOC. So I'm like, we're not
That's
getting
helpful for me to
recognized.
hear.
Yeah, we're not getting recognized. We don't feel comfortable in that space,
Mm.
and the space actually was trying to talk my son to be against me.
Really?
Yeah, so my son quit there. He was like, screw them. He goes, they don't like you. He goes, they really wanted me to be against you. They're mad that you accept me. I was like, what? He says, none of their parents accept them or anything like that. He goes, and they were talking about, he goes, your mom doesn't accept you. You can tell us. He's like, you're tripping. He goes, my mom loves me. Like, she's my number one cheerleader. And so that's why I want to create a safe place for people, black and brown, LGBTQI plus community.
Yep.
Sober homes. We need sober homes right out of rehab. Because, you know, he kept on going to the street until, remember, we couldn't find nothing. We have absolutely nothing. And we need them affordable for the individuals that are going, or we need funding going into sober homes so we can have individuals like Julian and so many other that have these lived experiences that need to be out here talking.
That's right.
That says this is what failed in my city and why I could not recover.
And then we need them to run for office.
Yes!
They need to be in the positions, right? Where they're
One day
voting
he's
for
gonna
it.
get in front of you, and I'm gonna tell you, you're like, where has this boy been? He needs to run for governor because he's so amazing. And I tell him, you're wasting your skills because you have so many skills, and now you have so much lived experience. I wish he didn't have to have, but now he has so much to give to everybody in that community and stuff. So definitely want to talk to you about later on maybe something that we can do in Fresno, and it can be something where it's comfortable for people because our community is growing in the LGBTQ community. It's
absolutely.
growing.
Yeah, I'm
So-
in the Tower District. It's one of the only safe places we have for the LGBTQ
Yeah.
community in the entire Central Valley.
Yes.
So
This it's bad to walk around anywhere. I mean, so many times. I can't even count on my hands anymore how many times he's been shot at or stabbed or just chased with guns and stuff because he's gay. So it's just faggot, you faggot, you faggot. Even if he goes to the west side, you know? He's black and the west side's black, but he's still gay. So they're like, and so you get attacked in Fresno. And it's bad, especially if you're homeless. It's a lot of rape. It's a lot of abuse. And the community doesn't want to come out and talk about it because why would you want to talk about being raped or being abused or having to do so many drugs because you want to forget about it, you know? And
Because
the
you've
drugs
got
are getting
trauma.
bad.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the fentanyl is getting so bad on our streets, Joaquin. It's so ugly. I've seen too many die now of fentanyl.
I have as well when I was in the ER. And it's only
It's-
tripled since then.
Oh yeah. Did your mom tell you about the hospital?
Oh yeah. She talks to me from time
That's
to
a long
time.
conversation. I know that's a different conversation, but there's gonna be changes.
I will just, looking at the time with
Yeah.
1 minute left, may ask that we follow up on the home safe
Yes,
discussion.
yes. Yeah, I took notes on everything that you brought up.
We had authored legislation a few years ago, AB 695, that did two things. It codified the home safe program and it lowered the age of APS from 65 to 60.
Okay,
Next year, I'm going to be looking to do something similar.
okay.
Now, I'd love if home safe could be preserved within this budget and all we were doing, we're codifying it. But I'm just going to say that it was a successful program and we need to bring it back. So
Great.
I'd love to be able to work with your organization next year as we attempt to pass that.
Okay, awesome. Noted. And hopefully we will see it funded this year, and that will give us a little bit more of a cushion, but we'll certainly report that back to the coalition and bring it forth to get some advocacy around it.
And if you can support 1840 or 2240, please let us know.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah,
Can we get a picture group
Oh,
picture
yeah.
before we leave?
I am not sure if you're going to be able to videotape. We have a policy against visual recordings and pictures without staff permission. So I just want to give you a heads up right now. If you have any problem with that, we can refer you to the Senate.
It is an odd concept considering that everyone's a public employee.
Completely understand that, but that's a Senate policy. Happy to refer you to the Senate. if you have a
Right,
problem.
publicly private. Well, I mean, if you can't do it legally, do it downright illegal.
I'll have to ask you to leave. So, like I said, that's a Senate policy, it's an office policy. Happy to refer you to the Senate if that's an issue.
Brendan, thank you so much for meeting with our group.
No worries.
My name is Mari. I work on state housing policy at an organization called the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And we're here as part of the Bring California Home Coalition and also as part of Advocacy Day for the Corporation for Supportive Housing. So everyone in this room does plays a different role in the work to end homelessness in California. And our coalition, many members of it have worked really closely with your boss, and one of the bills we're advocating around today is AB 653, which we know is a priority of hers. So just want to name that and know that we're here in a champion's office. But that's part of why we're here, is because, as you probably know, I mean, of course, the budget deficit is top of mind for everyone here in the building, but we're also in a position where we could be at risk of losing housing and homelessness investments, which have been really impactful over the past couple of years. We've seen the number of people in fiscal year 22-23, we saw over 70,000 people permanently exit homelessness in California, and at the same time, over 180,000 became homeless for the first time. So the investments that we've been making are really impactful. They're helping a lot of people exit homelessness. And people are falling into homelessness faster than we can rehouse them, which is why we're continuing to see numbers going up and up. And so we're really here to really push around asking your boss to step up to be a champion with us around ongoing funding. And there's also a couple proposals in addition to 653. SB 37 is a bill that's specifically looking to address homelessness among older adults and people with disabilities. So we'd love to talk to you about that too. But I won't go too much further into it, and actually I'll just let everyone here introduce themselves and share a little bit more about the work that they do.
Hi, my name is Maria Aguirre, and I'm a housing navigator at West Fresno Family Research Center located in Fresno. So we are actually operating under the new CalAIM initiative. So yeah, we provide housing navigation services, housing assistance with housing deposits, and housing tenancy.
Hi, I'm Marcella Wilhelm. I'm a JBA Youth Advocate, and also I'm a Resident Service Coordinator for low-income families, and I'm also a former foster youth as well.
My name is Des Martinez. I'm a Fresno advocate. I have a nonprofit called We're Not Invisible, and I also created a homeless union called Fresno Homeless Union that helps educate unhoused individuals, their rights while being unhoused, but also their housing rights and medical rights also too.
Hi, I'm Julian Crown. I'm a Policy and Research Associate for Housing Matters. We're a services provider in Santa Cruz County.
I'm Wes White with California Homeless Union and Poor People's Campaign.
So like we said, really at a high level, we're here to make sure that legislators are hearing the need to prioritize homelessness. And one of the populations of people who is most quickly rising and who's experiencing homelessness is people over the age of 50, older adults. And one of the bills that we're advocating around would create a rental subsidy program specifically for people in this population, because housing costs are going up, but when you're on a fixed income like Social Security, your income is not rising fast enough to make that cost. So a rental subsidy can help make up the difference and keep housing affordability within reach for people. And so, Des, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your experience working with older adults and being an older adult, right?
Yeah,
in Fresno
now I'm
navigating.
I reached that age where I'm an
Yeah.
older adult now. It's ridiculous. My age doesn't look like it, but I'm 51, so I'm considered an older adult. Okay, so in 2015, I was compelled to leave my residence due to domestic violence. Following the prescribed protocol, I reached out to law enforcement, filed a report, and sought refuge in a domestic violence shelter. Regrettably, the shelter was unable to accommodate me, leaving me with no choice but to spend the night on the streets, exposed to fear, trauma, and further abuse. This distressing experience led me to return to my abuser. During this experience, a passion ignited within me to advocate for safe havens for women and children. Over time, my advocacy expanded to encompass broader issues within my own county. I have established a nonprofit organization, initiated Homeless Union, and nationwide advocacy to combat homelessness, hunger, and champion the rights to housing and Medicare for all. Today, I'm considered an older adult with disabilities, and having very low income can result in myself experiencing homelessness again. So today, I urge you to support SB 37. I have personally seen numerous older adults facing illness, injuries, and diseases. It is essential to safeguard ourselves from mental, physical, and emotional abuse that we experience while being unhoused. Unfortunately, the number of deaths on California streets is increasing yearly. In Los Angeles alone, 900 unhoused individuals passed away on the streets, highlighting the severity of this issue with just in one county in California. In 2022, approximately over 100,000 individuals experience homelessness in California. 47% of them are age 50 or above, which equates to the estimated amount of 53,000 individuals of older adults that have spent nights or tragically lost their lives on the streets of California. 1.24 million individuals in California depend on SSI, comprising of 580,000 seniors and over 100,000 children with disabilities. Consider this potential increase in homelessness figures for the next year, or maybe 5 to 10 years from now. Have an affordable place to live enables individuals to afford essentials like medication, food, gas, bus fare for appointments. It also ensures that they don't have to worry about utilities being shut off, staying warm, or falling behind on rent, because even a single late payment can accumulate, potentially resulting in an eviction. Evictions for seniors and individuals with disability can sadly lead to homelessness. I'll never forget January 2018. I was driving down the street in the early AM to pass out hot chocolate when I saw an elderly woman lying on the ground with no blankets at all. I pulled over immediately to see if she was okay, only to touch her and found her body was frozen. I called 911 immediately. I was in shock and didn't know what to do. I was staring at somebody's grandmother that died right here on the sidewalk. When the ambulance got there, they reached down to take her vitals, and that's when her eyes moved. Nothing else on her body moved. Not her eyelids or any facial expressions. It was just her eyes that moved themselves. That's when the medical team went to go pick her up off the ground. She was so frozen to the ground, it sounded like Velcro being ripped apart. I then knew at that moment that she still had life in her. I sat down on the bus bench when they drove off with her, thinking about how much pain she suffered all night, freezing, almost to death, because she didn't have no place to live. Today, I still don't know if she made it because of HIPAA. The hospital won't give me any information, but this is something I will never forget. This is not the first body I've ever seen deceased on the streets of Fresno, or the last. I urge you once more to endorse SB 37. You possess the authority to effect this change. Let us collaborate in striving towards a future where no soul is left to perish in the cold and on the dark streets of California.
And I know we'd really love to see Assemblymember Reyes come on as a co-author to SB 37 if that's something that she'd be open to. Because it's really one where we want to show the amount of support and the priority of this issue. Does anyone else have anything they want to lift up around ongoing funding, or we can talk a little bit also another greatly impacted population where we've seen great progress from our state investments is young people. Through the HHAP program, we set aside 10% of state funds for homelessness for young people experiencing homelessness. And actually, while we've seen numbers of homelessness go up across the state overall, we've seen youth homelessness actually decrease by 21% in just a couple of years, which kind of demonstrates if we invest in a targeted way that really gets at the issues, we can see a lot of progress. We just haven't done that for the rest of the population yet. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to share more.
I can speak to ongoing funding and maybe a little about the importance of bills that provide that targeted assistance. So for us as a service provider, when we don't produce revenue, so we rely on trying to figure out what our incoming money is going to be based on looking at what does the state invest, what kind of grants are available. And when the state constantly makes one-off investments that maybe last for a year or maybe 3 years, but they're still one-off investments, it's hard to plan for our future and to scale up services that provide meaningful interventions that are going to ensure long-term solutions to homelessness. So whether that's the ability to offer staff career pathways, to reduce turnover, to ensure that they have opportunities and that we have wages that mean that our staff aren't also eligible for the services that we're providing, or it means being able to look at a project that might provide supportive housing and say yes, we're going to be able to fund this because we know that the state's grants are going to be there 3, 5, 6 years down the line. That allows us to do things that currently we can't do because we are constantly in a scarcity mentality. We don't ask anyone else to live in a scarcity mentality as far as services provided, but we ask that of homeless service providers. So for us, it's very hard. And thinking about the youth set aside, for me, I experienced homelessness when I was a transition age youth. I didn't get touched by the system. All I knew of the system was like, to me it meant shelters, and that was it. And I was not interested in a shelter. So I did not touch anything. Many of those youth programs, they include permanent housing, especially now. But there was no youth team, outreach team that could have reached me. And so I didn't know that. And so I wallowed in, being unsheltered, living in a car for quite some time, and only left that because I was lucky enough that I knew somebody who then provided me permanent housing. Not everyone is so lucky. For a service provider to ensure that we have outreach teams that can reach youth, to hire them, to train them, to know that we're going to build that team, we have to know that we'll have the money to pay them, not just this year, but 3 years from now. And so ongoing funding, set-asides like that 10% set-aside are very important for providing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, if I can say a couple more things, ongoing funding, not just SB 37, but even if we get SB 37, right, for older adults, for funding for older adults and people with disabilities to be able to stay housed, or prevent homelessness, we need ongoing funding for programs like that. We don't want next year 5 or 6 providers fighting for one grant, and then every year if you don't have ongoing funding, you have to learn new tools, you have to learn new ways to do all the new grant, and you have to, are we gonna have to hire 4 more people? Or, so it's like every year people are fighting for this grant that we have to fight for continuously every year in order to keep people employed, keep people in housing. I mean, this is stuff that we go through every single year. So ongoing funding for programs that work, keeping people housed, but also the 1011. If we don't oppose 1011, then we're gonna see a lot of people, youth, foster kids, and older adults, and people with disabilities dying on our streets more. Because we're not gonna oppose 1011, we're gonna criminalize them because there's no housing. And it's not their fault, there's no housing. California's behind. How many units in California are we behind in just
Over a
affordable
million.
housing?
Yeah.
Affordable housing is not affordable for people that are homeless. So we gotta think outside the box of affordable housing and think about 30% of that individual's income for payment of their housing to keep them stable in there, because affordable housing is not affordable for unhoused people at all. So.
1011, sorry, I'm
Yeah, so-
somewhat new to housing.
Yeah, SB
That's-
1011
that's
is, it's a bill over in the Senate right now. And it would essentially create, a new criminal penalty for sleeping outside, in a lot of areas of the state. And, it's actually not a new approach, it's something that many cities across California have done, continue to do for a really long time, and we've seen over and over again how it just complicates things and makes
Sure.
experience worse for people experiencing homelessness. And so right now that bill's over in Senate Public Safety. We hope it won't make it over to the Assembly, but certainly if it does, it's really important that there be a strong showing that we can't cut homelessness dollars and then make it a crime to
Sure.
experience homelessness. Like, we shouldn't ever make it a crime to experience homelessness, but we need to continue doing the right things as a state, doubling down on investments in the right solutions, and not just turning to blaming people experiencing homelessness and making their existence a crime, which is really what the bill proposes to do.
And then who's the author of 1011?
Senator Jones is the author, though I will say it has a number of Democratic co-authors, which
Okay.
makes us a little more worried than we might be otherwise.
Got it. And then for SB 37, who's the author of that?
Senator Caballero is the author,
Okay.
and that's over on the Assembly side now, so it's a 2-year bill.
Oh, okay. Do you know
But
where it
I
is?
believe it's in approps
Okay.
on the Assembly side. So yeah, hopefully that will make it to the floor, and again, it would be great to see Ms. Reyes come on as a co-author if she's open.
Yeah, we could certainly bring up the request to her.
Awesome.
For the funding pieces that you all were talking about, do you know, other members who've either put in requests to maintain the funding, or have you had any conversations with people who work on, I think it's sub 5, right? I think Sharon Kirksilva is the head of the state admin one, they cover a lot of the housing and
Right.
homelessness funding.
Yeah, so there's about like 100 folks here
Sure.
today, and so I know that the budget committee folks, particularly the relevant subcommittees, are top priorities to be
Yeah.
speaking to. A number of the programs are ones that are like the affordable housing programs were pretty much cut from the governor's budget. I know there's been energy on the legislative side to try to kind of sustain those programs. And then some of the homelessness programs are either seeing money delayed or like there's a program called HHAP that had a bonus fund structure to reward good outcomes. Those bonus funds are being clawed back. So I think there are, active conversations going on with the budget staff and budget chairs and really just trying to demonstrate the impact that those programs have had and like what would happen if they were taken away.
Yeah, no, I mean, for our purposes, she was on the budget subcommittee that covered the housing and homelessness stuff last year.
Okay.
So she's got some experience on those programs and
Yeah.
certainly is supportive of like homelessness funding and making sure that we're able to make housing more affordable. Now that she's on the housing committee, that is something that, she generally tries to support as much as she can. We've put in requests for one of our bills to have a housing portal to showcase affordable housing listings. I think one of the things we had talked about with folks is, the amount of units is important to build out certainly, but that's like a longer term problem. Like, it's not like even if we put in billions of dollars today, that's construction, all that, like that would still take a while to get to. Which is not to say that we shouldn't do so. It's more of like, as a long term plan, that's something that we can address incrementally. But in the short term, she's interested in finding way, like, what are affordable housing units that are available today that maybe residents or other folks are just not aware of. One, because it's difficult. Like I know I've certainly tried to find housing that's affordable, and like I am not homeless. I have a job. I work here, and it still is sometimes difficult for me to find that. So I can only imagine, like my mom or other folks, right, who are either like formerly undocumented or first generation Americans, like. A lot of those things are very difficult for them to grasp. And we have a lot of those folks in the IE. Like, we have a large Spanish-speaking population, immigrant population, Latino and Black populations. So we're trying to find ways, like, what are immediate ways to try to help address some of that housing. So I know she's put work into that. We have a bill on that, and we're trying to get funding, a modest, like $5 million to just try to do even that. And I can already tell you some of the conversations we've had with budget and the pros were like, basically, like, don't get your hopes up. And this isn't to me to discourage. I mean, you all are aware of the budget situation we're in, so I'm not the first to tell you this, and I'm not going to be the last person. But we are certainly trying to push as much as we can, and I think we're really just trying to be hopeful. I don't know actually how much in the end will leave in these funding pots, just given the lack of available dollars. Period. I did see recently, I think it's our budget person, one of the speaker's budget consultants. He has like a little bit of it's like a small newsletter. I recently read that the revenues are like at least up by $600 million, which good amount, not a lot in a $37 billion deficit, but I think the narrative that certainly the Assembly is pushing or at least experiencing is that there may be more money in the budget than maybe the governor has initially forecast. And honestly, I think to be like where we end up is whatever the budget or whatever the revenue projections look like in May when they do the May revise, that's probably going to be the number one thing that determines what gets funding, what doesn't. Although I do know that there's still some talks in the legislature about doing a housing bond. I don't know how much of that includes homelessness funding versus just outright housing production. But I think that the Assembly, certainly the Assembly, I can't speak for the Senate, but the Assembly is still kind of evaluating what bonds, if any, should be on the 2024 ballot. Because I know there are folks who they want to do climate bonds, they want to do education bonds, all of which are very lofty and good things to reach for. But I think the speaker's trying to be more thoughtful on if we're going to put like 5 bonds on the ballot, what does that look like for them being successful? What does that look like even for the state's ability to issue out bond revenue? So I know there's conversations about trying to consolidate them into one or a bond that covers multiple topics. So that could be a source of funding
Yeah.
for different programs, although I'm not in those discussions, and I think Wix's office is doing the housing one. So I think for us, it's really just seeing, what are the budget projections in May, what are the bond conversations, like, I think we're just really, as an office who's not directly involved in all these conversations, we're just looking to see where can we be helpful and what are the actual options available to us. She, I think she wants to do a lot, and granted she does, like, I can tell you from my personal experience. But I think, on her end, it's just, where does it make sense? What are the direct, district impacts? Because
Yep.
at the end of the day, right, the folks in ID 50, the IE folks are the ones we have to answer to. And granted, it's not like they're not experiencing homeless either. So, that's not like the
Right.
frame of message we're trying to say. But I think for us, it's really just seeing, what are programs that we think are going to help our constituents and also, obviously the residents of California. And, we're still kind of in the middle of the process, but certainly, let me just make sure. I can look at SB 37. If it's in a props, then it likely will get on the floor soon. Or maybe not. They may wait until later in the year to put it on. But point being, she'll see it, eventually. And then for SB 1011, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't reach our house.
Right.
So hopefully the Senate just kills it. But we'd have to look at that one again. I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I doubt she would be supportive of
Yeah.
penalizing homelessness. She
Right.
generally hasn't been.
She gets it, right?
Yeah.
Like, she gets the systemic aspects that are driving it.
And she's on Assembly Public. I mean, she's there right now. Like she's
Okay.
in
Yeah.
Assembly Public Safety Committee.
Okay.
So if the bill does make it over, she'll see it in committee before it hits the floor.
Great.
And I have a strong feeling she may, if they get that far, she'd make comments, and certainly I don't know if she'd want to support the bill, but I also don't know where the committee makeup will be. It feels like we're kind of shifting in a different direction than in past years.
Yeah.
What about they have this ERF encampment resolution funds, and that's millions and millions of dollars in the
Yeah.
encampment resolution funds. And I'm not gonna speak for other counties, but for my county, they need to be investigated because the encampment resolution funds that we got, we received like $17 million, and of course our city got to keep 1.7 million of that because they wrote the grant. Then they gave it to one provider. They didn't write an RFP, they did an RFQ, so they went behind and they gave it to one of the main people that is the mayor star right now for the provider of Fresno. And I feel it's unfair because those funds, some of them funds got used for street lamp posts. And I keep on asking and asking, where's the other millions of dollars? And I'm not getting it. Even with the public ask through the thing, it takes like a year for my county to give us anything. But encampment resolution funds should have been used for housing.
Yeah.
We're spending millions and millions of dollars throughout California to sweep people off of a property that we're gonna move 20 feet over. And then plus it's supposed to be for one encampment. In my county, they're doing an 18 by 5 block radius of the downtown Fresno that we just got $250 million for downtown Fresno. So the money that should be going to housing is those type of grants that we don't need. We can get the people off the street if we have housing. Because we're not gonna do anything by cleaning up an encampment. It's not gonna do anything. We're just gonna move somewhere else.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
move somewhere else because we have to live and we're gonna make another home out of it. And then you guys are gonna come and take it down again. Build the housing so I don't have to keep on moving and get rid of the encampment resolution funds. I really feel that we're wasting so much money with that ERF.
Yeah, and certainly I can't speak to Fresno County.
Yeah.
We don't represent that area. I would recommend, if the outcome you're looking for is one, just get more information on where the money is being spent, what it's being spent on, and you feel like maybe the local government is being slow or maybe in some cases not responsive. I would certainly ask you to contact an assembly office that can inquire on your behalf. Like, I know I've certainly worked with folks in our district, asking, our local governments, like, what are you doing with this? What's going on here? What's this project? And, we'll write letters to our local governments. I was actually before you all came in writing a letter or sending a letter to one of our local governments related to a project that they're looking at. And generally speaking, I would say local governments are more responsive. Obviously, if there's like an official letter from a member asking like what's going on here, because then they feel like they're under a spotlight and they have more scrutiny and then they have to produce something. And because our elections are every 2 years and more statewide, they encompass multiple cities. We have larger populations to serve and not quite as beholden to like smaller interests, like I think you mentioned, like a specific provider that they chose. That would be my suggestion. Is that's like a good way to get information. In terms of like redirecting funds, I'm not as familiar with the incumbent funds, the recovery resolution funds, so I don't know how they work mechanically. But I mean, if we're looking for funding to build housing, and that's kind of just on the table, I certainly would make that recommendation to someone in budget or even your local folks to make that request, because I think that could be a way to address the problem without spending new money, because it's not new. It's already
They
there.
are mostly one-time grants that are, at this point, have been allocated
And
out.
this has been the third one now, the third year for ERF, but it's millions and millions and millions.
Thank you so much for taking the
Yeah,
time
of
to chat
course.
with us and for your boss's leadership on these
Yeah.
issues. Like we said, 653 is another one that folks will be lifting up in the Capitol
Cool.
here today. So
Love that.
here's a folder for
Okay.
you. And I think we met when I was working at Housing California.
Okay.
But I'm now.
Julian, you wanna
right?
Yeah. Just a couple months ago, I transitioned over to working at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities.
Oh, good.
Still working on housing and homelessness policy, but
Fantastic.
slightly different seat. Yeah. How are you doing?
From all angles.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us. We're here as representatives of the Bring California Home Coalition and as part of the Corporation for Supportive Housing's Advocacy Day. And really, a big part of why we're here is to fight and ask for champions to fight alongside us to preserve and expand and make ongoing funding for housing and services for people experiencing homelessness. We know the state is in a really tough budget scenario, and really we've only made investments as a state in housing and homelessness around the past 5 years. Before that, the state didn't play a huge role in funding for housing and services. And in that time, we've seen tremendous impacts of that state funding. So for example, in 2023, we had 70,000 people permanently exit homelessness in California. That's per our state's data system.
Last year, 2023?
Yeah.
So, okay.
But during that same year, the same time period, over 180,000 became homeless for the first time. So we're making tremendous impacts with the resources and the increased resources, and it's just not enough to keep up with the pace of the ways that the housing crisis is impacting our communities. So that's part of what we're here to talk about, along with a couple of other bills that we think would be particularly impactful. But I'll let folks here introduce themselves and just share a little bit more about the work that they do in this sector.
Hi, I'm Julian Crown. I'm a Policy and Research Associate for Housing Matters. We're a services provider in Santa Cruz County.
Great. Welcome.
Des Martinez with We're Not Invisible out of Fresno, California, boots on the ground advocate.
Fantastic. Yeah, welcome also.
Hello, my name is Maria Aguirre and I'm a housing navigator at West Fresno Family Research Center in Fresno, working under the new initiative, CalAIM.
Great. Thanks for coming.
Wes White, Salinas, Monterey County Homeless Union, Poor People's Campaign, and just trying to stop the sweeps.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Rosella Wilhelm. I'm a JBA youth advocate and former foster youth myself, and I'm also a residence coordinator for low-income families.
Great. Yeah, thanks for being here, all you
Of
guys.
course, thank you.
Well, we know that your boss has really, taken a strong stand in support of really trying to do the right things on homelessness. So we know we're talking to an ally here, but we also know that it's really going to take champions to prioritize homelessness in this year's budget. And one of the populations that I know folks in this room are really particularly passionate about is older adults experiencing homelessness. We've seen older adults as the fastest growing population of people experiencing homelessness. Many older adults, there was just a big survey of people experiencing homelessness in California done by UCSF, and it showed that most people who are experiencing homelessness over the age of 50 experienced homelessness for the first time when they were 50 plus, right? So this is really an issue where folks' incomes are not keeping up with rising rents. And SB 37 is a bill authored by Senator Caballero that's now over on the Assembly side.
Tell me the bill number again.
SB 37, and there's info about it in that folder. And we would love to see Assemblymember Schiavo come on as a co-author to that bill. And it really is sort of targeted rental subsidies for older adults experiencing homelessness. And yeah, we can, I don't know if folks want to talk a little bit more about rental subsidies, specifically the kind of experience of older adults and things like that.
I think a lot of things that they're missing right now with older adults is that our shelters. Like they think the shelters are a good thing. Let's get the older adults. That's the emergency. The older adults and youth, and get them into the shelters, the home key shelters. Well, unfortunately, the providers of these home key shelters state that the people with disabilities and the older adults are a liability to their insurance. They can slip, fall. There's been plenty of fall, slips, hips broken, all kinds of stuff. Older adults would be coming back from the hospital because they have a broken hip because there was a water leak in their room that wasn't taken care of. The ambulance will pull up to the gate and they do not allow them back in the facility. No matter what time you come back to the shelter, once you go to the hospital in the shelters, as an older adult with disabilities, you're not allowed back in because you're considered a liability, which puts the older adult back onto the street to be swept daily and have their stuff taken away, and eventually they die because it's too cold or it's too hot outside. We don't have enough ADA in the shelters at all. We have about 58,000 individuals, older adults, just 58,000 out of that 111,000 unhoused in California. 58,000 of them are older adults with disabilities. And if we don't get the shelters with ADA, and if we don't build housing that's all ADA, we're going to continuously see our grandparents out there dying on the streets. Unfortunately, it's not a way that they should have to go. We should have some type of housing where it's tiny homes where they can own it themselves with their little payments. You know, they're on fixed income. Their fixed income never going to go up. But the housing cost is going up tremendously to where we're seeing so many of the youth and the older adults that are out there now. So I think continuous funding and programs like SB 37 would be amazing. Opposing 1011 when it comes up would be great because we don't want to criminalize your grandmother because she's out there and she doesn't have anybody. We're seeing more and more grandparents out there that don't have families able to take care of them or take them in. A lot of our vouchers don't allow us to take our parents in either. I can lose my housing if I let my grandma come in, so now I gotta let her suffer outside. So these are the things that I think is very important. Housing's always important. We always talk about housing every year, but we need to definitely all get together and build more social housing or housing affordable at 30% of the individual's income. Affordable housing is not affordable for your grandparents. They're not making $5,000 a month because the AMI is at 70 and you have to make $50,000 a year. It's over $5,000 a month. My grandmother's not going to be able to go in there with their fixed income. So affordable housing is not affordable for all. It's not affordable for the unhoused. It's not affordable for people working a minimum wage job. Your son working a minimum wage job can't even afford 80% AMI, you know? So we need to start thinking about having different types of housing, social housing for individuals with low income. And that's just not adults, that's our children with a minimum wage job.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about the liability of slip and fall. It traditionally had been that was kind of easier to get zoning approved with senior housing because they tend to be less. People are less nervous about those people, but yeah, this issue of the slip and fall liability stuff that's problematic.
Housing providers in California, this is sort of like a side issue, but it's related, is supportive housing providers have seen their insurance premiums rising like 500%, like really extreme insurance increases that have increased operating costs to be able to run a permanent supportive housing building, but their grants aren't kind of going up commensurately, or they have a capital grant that they got 10 years ago, but it's not taking into account all of these increased costs. And so I think that's probably why some folks are like turning people away, but that's, you know, like that's not a good outcome for either party, right? The provider or the person experiencing homelessness. So it's just kind of that's also a big challenge with one-time grants is folks are trying to plan for an uncertain future with a one-time grant, and when costs go up, but the grant is like the future of the grant is uncertain, it just makes it really precarious.
Well, in a lot of instances, they need services, right? You can't, maybe you get a grant to build the bricks and mortars of the shelter, but you need more staff.
Right. And Maria, I don't want to put you on the spot because I know, like working with CalAIM, you were telling me earlier about how, you know, through CalAIM and drawing down Medicaid resources, we're able to fund some new services like housing navigation, but then the like vouchers and the housing are not there to actually navigate people to.
Right, so I was just actually gonna chime in and share how. So under CalAIM and the housing deposits, the Medi-Cal member is able to receive $6,000 once in their lifetime. That is to cover first month's rent, the housing deposits, and any furniture that is needed, that is medically needed. But what happens after the $6,000 are gone? How is this a homeless individual is going to be able to sustain their monthly rent moving forward without having a voucher or some kind of housing subsidy?
Right now, really the only vouchers we have are federally funded, housing choice vouchers. There's about one of them for every 4 people that needs them, right? And so something like SB 37 or some of our state grants are a way for the state to fill in some of that huge gap. We also have to get the federal government to do more. And in the meantime, there's just not enough of those resources to cover.
We should actually look at maybe, I know in my county, when they opened up the Section 8 HUD voucher, 37,000 people applied. They said within 48 hours. 37,000 people just for my county. And that's insane because we don't have it. I have people out there that I help on the streets and they have a voucher. They're walking around with that piece of paper. It's gold, but I can't get them into a place. Either they're disabled and the apartment's upstairs, there's no elevators in the apartment complex. Fresno's been pretty much single. Now we get to build up in density in Clovis. I sued Clovis, California for affordable housing and won. What we did is we implemented like initiatives in there to get developers to come and say, okay, we're gonna bypass this, we're gonna get this done faster, the zoning's already cleared for us, we're gonna get incentives for this, and we made it to where we wanted it to be like a gift that you would get if you came and built affordable housing. That's how I got to learn about affordable housing. It's not affordable for me. I was like, wait a minute, I still can't get in there, right? Even though they're gonna build it, I still can't enjoy it, right? So now I'm working more on towards low income. We have to stay with what her income is and mine is different. But I can pay 30%, she can pay 30%, he can pay 30%. But everybody is different, everybody's income.
Of course.
So.
Yeah.
Like currently in Fresno County, the waiting list for low income or / affordable housing is between 2 to 3 year waiting list. Every day I receive several phone calls of families that are on the verge of becoming homeless, and they're calling me to see, hey, is there any units available? And it breaks my heart that I have to let them know, like, I'm sorry, but I have to put you on a waiting list, and it's gonna take between 2 to 3 years before you can be put into one of these low-income housing.
Yeah, I know the LA mayor has come up with this, I'm forgetting what it's called now, but anyway, this fast-track way of approving all housing of all sort of income levels, and anyway, I'm forgetting the shorthand phrase for it, but
It's like an executive
it's
ED 3 or something.
Right, exactly, and anyway, according to the LA Times, like it's we'll see, because it takes a while before units start getting built. But apparently the developers are loving it, and they're getting units out, and they're actually market rate developers who are actually able to price things at a reasonable rate, because they're not having all these upfront costs and trying to get through all the administrative hurdles and local red tape of getting units built. So and my point is, I think more communities should look at that model.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think, it's really a proceed on all fronts like approach, right? We need to, I think folks are hearing in a couple of days, like we need to treat this as a life or death crisis because it is for, you know, really millions of families who are experiencing or really on the brink of experiencing homelessness. So, you know, if our coalition can ever be a resource to your boss, you know, we know, again, she's sticking her neck out. We want to have her back in that. I'll say quickly, Des mentioned SB 1011. It's another bill that we're unfortunately speaking out against.
Oh, okay.
It's still over on the Senate side. It's going to be in Senate Public Safety, but it would make it a crime to camp in most of the land in California. And it would really increase the authority of local criminal legal systems to punish people for experiencing homelessness. And, you know, it unfortunately has a bipartisan coalition of legislators behind it. So
Who's the author?
Senator Jones is the author, and Senator Blake Spear is the chief co-author on it. And so, you know, that's part of why we're especially concerned about it, because what we really don't want to see is, you know, on one side we're saying, oh, we actually can't fund the solutions to homelessness, and then on the other side we're saying, oh, we're going to expand policies that do the wrong thing, right, which make homelessness worse for the people who are experiencing it. So just want to put that on your radar, even though, you know, we hope it won't make its way over to the assembly side, but, you know, want to make sure we're sounding the alarm about that.
They should really look at the finance, the money that's gonna go into it. Because
Right, 'cause
as an
that's costly
unhoused
too.
person, you give me a ticket to move, then I'm gonna take that ticket, and then I'm gonna move down the street 25 feet, cause that's what the law says. Then you're gonna come the next day. I can get 50 tickets, I don't care. I don't have nowhere to go. What are you gonna do? You're just gonna cite me, cause you're not gonna take me to county jail, cause it's too full. So you're gonna come over and you're gonna cite me, and then I'm done.
Well, we might not be spending money on housing, but we're spending money on the police overtime budgets, right?
And so what it does, they don't think about what the effects of abusing somebody like that mentally does. Now, how much is the state gonna end up paying for all the mental issues or mental health that people get from being unhoused and the abuse of criminalization of being homeless? So they gotta think about the long-term effect of how many people they're gonna actually be just being out there, period. You don't have to have a drug problem or be mentally ill when you're homeless. But once you become unhoused, you can become an addict, and you can definitely think about suicide 1,000,000 times a day. So we gotta prevent that. In order to prevent that, is housing. It's housing. It's not throwing money at providers and saying shelter them. It's not encampment resolution funds, and it's not, you know, Project Home Key shelters anymore. It's about housing. If we don't build a housing, we're gonna see you next year and going over. We're gonna say the same thing next year. I'm just gonna bring a tape recorder.
Yeah, push play, I know.
No, and thanks for bringing the Caballero bill to my attention. We'll look at possibly co-authoring that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for
Thanks,
taking
you
the
guys.
time.
Yeah.
Great to see you again. Well, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. We are all coming here as part of the Bring California Home Coalition and the Corporation for Supportive Housing's joint Advocacy Day. And all of the folks in this group, along with some other blue-shirted individuals around the Capitol today, around over 100 folks, all play different roles in California's work to end homelessness. And really a big part of why we're here is because, as you probably know, with the budget forecasted the way it is, there's actually a threat to our investments in affordable housing and homelessness. They're among the funds that are most directly on the chopping block. And it is critically important that we not only continue to invest and protect against those cuts, but that we start to really create a strategy to get to ongoing funding at scale for homelessness and housing and services. And folks here in this space really have seen both the impacts of having resources and the consequences when we don't have resources for folks who are experiencing homelessness. So we'll give everyone a chance to just introduce themselves and share a little bit more about what they do.
Sure. I'm Julian Crown. I'm a Policy and Research Associate for Housing Matters. We're a services provider in Santa Cruz County.
And I'm Des Martinez out of Fresno County. I have a nonprofit called We're Not Visible, and also created a homeless union out of Fresno.
actually didn't introduce myself, but I'm Mari Castaldi, and I work at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is a DC-based organization, but I work on California housing and homelessness policy.
You work for who?
The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities.
And my name is Maria Aguirre, and I am a housing navigator with West Fresno Family Research Center, which is located in Fresno, and we are operating under the new CalAIM initiative.
Hi, I'm Marcella Wilhelm. I'm a J-Bay advocate and former foster youth, and I'm also a service coordinator for low-income families.
Appreciate you all making the time and, being able to, I guess, because I know a lot of you guys are from the district as well right here, so it'd be nice to hear about, the stories of how you are helping out constituents in our district.
Yeah, I don't know if those of y'all who are in the district want to talk a little bit more about your work
Okay,
and
so
your priorities.
my priorities?
Yeah.
My priorities are keeping people housed. My priorities are doing what I can do to come here to, I don't know what else I can do besides jump around on the rooftops naked to get people's attention so I can say, hey, we have a problem in the valley. We have a serious problem. We keep on giving money to encounter resolution funds. We keep on giving money to the Project Home Key. These things are not working for our older adults. We have older adults out there in the streets, 58,000 older adults, grandparents, are on the streets of California. Why? Because Project Home Key doesn't work for them. Because Project Home Key is for providers that have insurance policies that don't want to cover a slip and fall, a hip replacement, or anything like that. So we have 58,000 people on the streets of California because we're not paying attention to the older adults. We're not having anything ADA. We have over 100,000 children that depend on SSI. What's going to happen when they grow up? We have over, I forgot the number for it was 58,000 older adults, right? There's 1.24 million people rely on SSI in California. 1.24 million rely on SSI. Imagine what homelessness will look like next year when you don't have housing for them, right?
We should have mentioned too that SB 37 is one of the bills that we're here advocating for today.
Yes,
we know that Senator Caballero is the champion behind that bill, so just want to note that exactly what you're talking about, that gap between what SSI can pay and what housing costs. It's part of what SB 37 is trying to do, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and she authored it, right? She authored it, so I definitely want to tell her thank you because I had a speech ready, but I definitely want to leave a copy with you because it's so. I need her to understand the power that she has, that she's utilizing to write this, the amount of people that she'll end up saving. She's fighting not just for the 58,000 older adults that are out there, or the 100,000 kids that are on SSI, or the 1.24 million people that rely on Social Security disability. These are the people that she's preventing from being homeless if SB 37 goes through. So if I can just read this really quick, I think I should know it by heart by now. In 2015, I was compelled to leave my residence due to domestic violence. Following the prescribed protocol, I reached out to law enforcement, filed a report, and sought refuge in a domestic violence shelter. Regrettably, the shelter was unable to accommodate me, leaving me with no choice but to sleep outside on the streets, exposed to fear, trauma, and further abuse. This distressing experience led me right to my abuser. During this experience, a passion ignited within me to advocate for safe havens for women and children. Over time, my advocacy expanded to encompass broader issues within my county. I have established a nonprofit organization, initiated a homeless union, and nationwide advocacy to combat homelessness, hunger, and champion the rights of housing and Medicare for all. Today, I'm considered an older adult with disabilities, and having very low income can result from me experiencing homelessness again. So I urge you, thank you for supporting SB writing, authoring SB 37. I have personally seen numerous adults facing illness, injuries, and diseases. It is essential to safeguard ourselves from mental, physical, and emotional abuse experienced while we're being unhoused. Unfortunately, the number of deaths on California streets is increasing yearly. In Los Angeles alone, 900 unhoused individuals passed away on the streets last year, highlighting the severity of the issues with just in one county in California. In 2022, approximately over 100,000 individuals experienced homelessness on California streets, 47% of them being 50 age or above, which equates to the amount of 53,000 individuals have spent the night or tragically lost their lives on the streets of California. 1.2 million individuals in California depend on SSI, comprising of 580,000 seniors and over 100,000 children with disabilities. Consider the potential increase in homelessness figures next year or the next 5 to 10 years. Having an affordable place to live enables individuals to be able to afford essentials like medication, food, gas, bus fare for their appointments. It also ensures that they don't have to worry about utilities being shut off, staying warm, or falling behind on rent. Even a single late payment can accumulate, potentially resulting in an eviction. Evictions for seniors and individuals like myself with disabilities can sadly lead us back to homelessness. I will never forget January 2018. I was driving down the street in the early AM to pass out hot chocolate when I saw an elderly woman laying on the ground with no blanket at all. I pulled over immediately to see if she was okay, only to touch her and found that her body was frozen. I called 911 immediately. I was in shock and didn't know what to do. I was staring at somebody's grandmother that died right here on the sidewalk. When the ambulance got there, they reached down to take her vitals, and that's when her eyes moved. Nothing else on her body moved, not her eyelids or any facial expressions. It was just her eyes that moved themselves. That's when the medical team went to go pick her up off the ground, and she was so frozen to the ground, it sounded like Velcro being ripped apart. I then knew at that moment that she still had life in her. I sat down on the bus bench when they drove off with her, thinking about how much pain she suffered all night, just freezing almost to death because she had no place to live. Today I still don't know what happened to her because of HIPAA. The hospital will not allow to give me any information at that time. This is something that I will never forget. This is not the first body that I've seen deceased on the streets of Fresno, and it's not going to be the last. So I thank you for authoring SB 37. You possess the authority to affect the change, and you did it. So let's keep on collaborating to strive forward for a future with no souls are left to perish outside on the cold.
Do you have a copy of that by
Yeah.
I think Senator would love.
But this is the support one, so I had to change a little bit because I said thank you.
No, but you know.
And there's some pictures in the back of elders that I want her to know are still alive on the streets, and they've been waiting for 3 years. Project Home Key won't take them to the motels.
And these are all people.
They're a liability. They're considered a liability, so they don't get into the shelters. And this is something that she needs to know. The shelters are not working for the elderly. This is why when UCSF, HHI, we did a statewide study, and one hasn't been done since the late 80s. And during our study, it took a whole year for us to do the whole state of California. And the amount of elders that are out here on the streets, and because Project Home Key is working for some, they're not taking our older adults. This is why the statewide study showed that there's a majority of older adults, 50 plus, that are out on the streets. Because they can't afford the fixed income, you can't afford rent, you can't. I mean, even minimum wage, you can't afford affordable housing. You just can't. My county is 70,000 AMI. You got to make 50,000 in order to qualify for 80% affordable housing, and that's somebody making over $5,000 a month. You know, my son or your cousin working at McDonald's can't even afford affordable housing. You know what I'm saying? So we have to think about the numbers. We have to think about the youth that have the minimum wage jobs, and what are we going to do for them? They need 30% of their income. The adults on fixed income, they need to pay 30% of their income. We need to stop being put all into one pot because we're all homeless people. We need to be separated. We're all different. We all have our different issues, and we're all in a different bracket. You know, so, and we need ADA. We don't have enough ADA apartments, complexes, shelters. The shelters, how many do they have? 2. The state of California only says that you have to have 2. The state of California right now has an ADA compliance where they're building affordable housing. And it's not
need to have 2
units.
For a whole complex or for a whole?
For ADA units, yeah, in a complex. So, but this is where we don't have housing. Even if they build housing, how are you going to get the 58,000 older adults off the streets? You're not, because you're not building ADA. You're not building stuff for walkers and wheelchairs and rollies, sink levels, you know, where they can cook their food at home or in the refrigerator. You just don't have it. we don't even have wraparound resources. We say we do, but we don't. And that's something I think that we need what do we call a liaison? Somebody in the middle between the state and these providers, a third party that can sit there and actually go and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that we're not kicking out the older adults, we're not kicking out the youth, that we are taking care of them. But until we make changes here at this state level, then we're still gonna have the older adults out there.
And I think like the reality of having a lot of one-time grants, like or short-term opportunities, is it leaves a lot of gaps. So I know like in Fresno, you're helping families navigate trying to find housing, but only have like a one-time offering. So you could talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, we are operating under this new CalAIM initiative where Medi-Cal is actually paying for the housing navigation services, the housing deposit, and the housing tenancy, which with the housing deposit, it covers up to $6,000 per member once in their lifetime. So the housing deposits covered, which is the housing deposit, first month's rent, last month's rent, and any furniture that is medically needed. Yes, that is good. But however, what's going to happen with a member afterwards, after their house? How are they going to be able to sustain their monthly rent moving forward?
What was that program you mentioned?
CalAIM.
CalAIM is the one that does that first month's rent, the deposit, and any
medically necessary furniture.
Is that is there a sunset clause for when CalAIM is going to end up,
From my understanding, it's a 5-year program initiative.
And it's hard, right? Because there's not really the long-term housing resources to connect to.
Right. So there's really no affordable housing units currently in the county of Fresno. The waiting list for any low-income housing / affordable housing is 2 to 3 year waiting list. So families that are looking for something right away, it's like we have to let them know, I'm sorry, but I have to put you on a waiting list, and it's gonna take between 2 to 3 years before you can be housed into one of these low-income apartments. So that's one of the challenges that we as housing navigators are facing, among others, but I think the biggest one is the lack of affordable housing or low-income housing.
And Rosella, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you were talking earlier too about how you've been able to access some support for rental assistance, but only really short term. So I don't know if you want to talk more about your experience trying to navigate these systems.
So I'm a former foster youth. I aged out last year at 21. I'll be 22 this year. And housing for foster youth is such a tricky thing to navigate, especially in the state of California with a huge deficit with income and defunding a bunch of foster youth organizations and programs with money, as well as even with homelessness and trying to prevent that from happening. I was granted a voucher that was supposed to be put in place actually last year. I applied for it last January and I didn't get it until December. I was already aged out last in May. I was literally on the brink of becoming homeless. I didn't have a job because I had to sacrifice everything. I had to drop out of school even though I had 2 classes left. I had to stop working because they weren't giving me enough hours, and they were also getting rid of my position as well. So I just had no way of living, and I was I'm very set on becoming homeless. There's no way I can do this. I can't afford a 1-bedroom apartment at $16.50 at 21. That's just not possible, especially with minimum wage. I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to work myself to death, and so I was granted this voucher, and even when I got it, I could not use it because my apartment was $50 too high. The voucher would not take it. So I'm having a hard time navigating, okay, what apartment is suitable that can take my voucher? Is for 1, what landlords will take it. 2, is it going to be affordable? Because there's limits to what SHRA can take and can fund. So right now, a lot of youth actually are having a hard time finding a voucher that they can put in place that's affordable for them to navigate with. And it's difficult because a lot of landlords don't want to take it. They hear the name foster youth, they're like, oh no, it's such feel like foster youth, the moment you hear it, is such a stereotypical name because a lot of people think they're troubled, they're a burden, all of these names that are just absolutely absurd and not accurate at all. We're a very vulnerable community who just want love and support, and so far we've not gotten that. It's offensive that people want to defund all of these organizations, throw us on the street, and then judge us because sex trafficking and sex work is all we know. It's literally something that we've done our entire lives just to fend to live, and something that we shouldn't have to do anymore at all. And housing is a big thing that the moment we're given housing and the money to be able to afford that and the opportunity, just a stepping stone, I can guarantee you homelessness will go down, the rates of sex work between youth and homelessness as well will go down. So much will go down, there will be so much gradual, amazing process. We wouldn't even be having to have this conversation. We wouldn't even be here because the moment you provide housing, it's literally everything. There will be so much process and so much progression. And I'm here for foster youth as a voice from John Burton Advocacies, who are amazing, and from LSS as well. They're another nonprofit housing navigation program that assists youth that have aged out. Just to say, like, come on, please provide housing, not these cuts, not anything. We want the help, and we can promise you that this is something that is needed. No matter what numbers say, it's what happens behind closed doors, and something that you guys don't get to see because you guys are not actively out there seeing what's going on. But it's such a shame that I can't even use the voucher I was granted. And I'm going to lose it probably in May because I cannot find an apartment to go to that will take it. So I'm back to almost being homeless once again because I can't find a place that will take it in time. I have until May 20th to use it. And I'm probably going to lose it, and I'm going to have to wait a whole another a year or two just to use it again and reapply. And even that, it's a very lengthy process, as was said earlier. It's a very lengthy process, even for us youth.
What's like the maximum amount of like voucher can you cover?
Well, it depends on each county. I know I'm trying to move to Fair Oaks to be closer to school because I really want to finish. I have 2 classes left. I want my AA, and I can't do it. But I know the maximum for Fair Oaks is $1,750, and I found apartments that are $1,605. It's just the move-outs. Oh, they won't be ready till June or July. Oh, I'm so sorry, we can't take the voucher. We don't work with foster youth. Oh, we don't want to work with HHRA. Oh, it's just too much. Like, they just won't accept it. And even apartments that do take, the vouchers are quite literally full. They're too full. And I don't want to have to go to a shelter because, as I said, shelters are not needed. They're not helpful, and I don't want to traumatize myself. I've already been through enough, and it's just not going to be progressive for me in my future. So each voucher the vouchers just depends on the zip code and the area you're in. Some are flexible, but it's just hard to navigate. The move out, the fees. Who's going to pay to break my lease if I have to? Who's going to pay the security deposit, because to break my lease is $2,500. I don't have that kind of money. Who's going to do that? Oh, well, we can't because there's no funding anywhere to help all these youth move into a secure place where they can use their voucher for secure housing. So it's just like a loophole that is not needed, and it all comes down to funding, and everything's kind of connected.
Well, it's one of those things where, again, we consistently hear from the public that housing and homelessness is the top concern of everyone in the state. And so the fact that it would be one of the first things on the chopping block in a time of a budget deficit, it just it doesn't add up. We can't afford to take our foot off the gas. I think we've seen progress being made with investments. But if the bottom drops out now, we're just going to see more and more people caught in these endless cycles with no way out. So it's really, our coalition, what we're working towards long term is actually a dedicated source of funding for homelessness. So finding a revenue source that would provide year-over-year funding specifically to housing and services, so that we don't have to kind of come asking every single year, but that we can say, hey, this is so important as our state that we're committing to funding it in an ongoing way. So I really think that we know that that might not happen this year, but especially as we go into deficits, we could be looking at things like corporate tax loopholes or different opportunities and ways to really fund this in a sustainable manner. And Wes, I don't know if you have other Salinas perspectives you want to lift up, because I know you're also in the district.
Yeah, lots of Salinas issue. So I gave you this book, Make a Difference is what it's called. My friend Rita, who's also co-president for Salinas Monterey County Homeless Union, which is part of the Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival. She's just a mom, but between the main point is people have power within themselves to regulate themselves, and they did a rules run tent encampment, and it lasted for like a year. They brought in the first porta potty to Chinatown in Salinas, and everybody behaved. I mean, there was no problems. The only problem was that you're not paying rent, and you don't belong there. So got to find somewhere else. But where? The easiest thing to do is stop the sweeps. You save a lot of money doing that instead of giving it to the dump run and everybody. And then you could spend that on running water, electricity for folks while we're deciding what kind of housing we're going to build. But we can make them harmless instead of homeless just by identifying them. And I'm going to tell you right now, 90% of people in Salinas are signing up for services, HMIS cars, so they're identified, and they're looking to be protected by the state, the county, everybody else, and they should be afforded. If they sign up for services, they should be afforded a place to be. Immunity from police contact, 400 square feet in a structure, and they can build it themselves or whatever. They have a car, and as long as they keep it tent and ground, and it's not a health and safety issue, then they should be passed over. And that should also be a policy in writing among jurisdictions, especially the state. Hey, if you don't want to get your stuff taken, clean up your space. But then actually allow that to happen and validate people and give them the respect of having, citizenship, for one thing. I mean, you can have all the personal property you want, but if you don't have any real property to put it on, you don't deserve it, which is wrong. And it's just open discrimination at its finest. So every stripe of any denomination or demographic you can think of, I'll find you one that lives outside. And we just need to validate people, and I know it'd be real easy if we just identified them and then said, look at these people are signing for cars. We have a fiduciary responsibility as a jurisdiction to allow them to grow, not just take everything out from under them.
Just to put on your radar too, we know that Senator Caballero is a champion for a lot of these issues and standing with us on things like SB 37 and really pushing for the right things. But there's also a bill that we're particularly worried about this year, SB 1011, which is currently in the Senate Public Safety. And it would it would make it a crime to be homeless in most of the state, like actually make it a misdemeanor to camp. And the bill actually has some bipartisan support right now, which is especially concerning, even though the author is a Republican. Senator Jones is the author, and Blake Spear is the co-author. And so, we've seen several cities across the state pass really similar policies. We've seen again and again how they traumatize people. They don't solve their homelessness. They get them connected even more with the criminal justice system. And it's really costly we're basically spending money on policing homelessness instead of housing people and all of these solutions. So, we don't know if that bill will make it to the floor, but it's one where we would also really love to see Senator Caballero kind of, because she stands for the right solutions, to also, push back against all the wrong
I'll let
solutions.
you know of that bill in particular. I didn't know about that bill. So I'll try to look at the language and really kind of see what it does.
Thank you.
And being that will go through public safety and most likely appropriations, Senator Caballero at some point is going to be able to get her eyes on that one. So I'll definitely.
And there's some information in there about that one as well. And
They should really look at when they look at the 1011, they should look at the money that they've spent on Project Home Key and Encampment Resolution Fund. over $300 million, I think just in my county alone. So that could have built some nice villages, some tiny home villages for permanent stability. We spend more money displacing people at encampments than we do actually housing people. I know each one that gets done, and private properties too, because this is affecting private property owners. They might have a piece of property that's empty, and then you have a whole camp on there. The city will come and send 20 people out there, code enforcement, police, and that homeowner's getting billed because the encampment moved onto their property that they never knew anything about. Now you got $35,000 that the owner has to pay for them cleaning up the encampment, but they can't afford it. So you know what they do? They have to give it to the city because they can't afford it. So you have cities, you're allowing cities to come in and take people's property that their mom left them because they can't afford it because people don't have a place to live. So it's not just affecting the unhoused, we're spending too much money displacing people and not building a permanent solution. And that's what 1011 would do. Also 1011, we don't care about it. We don't care if you criminalize us. Give me the tickets. I don't care. What are you going to do to me? You're not going to lock me up. The jails are full. You're going to cite me out at every single place. I got 50 tickets. 50 tickets of trespassing. What are you going to do? I'm not going to prison. So we're wasting money. This is taxpayers' money. How many courts have tickets? How many unhoused people are out on the streets right now with warrants? But we don't care about the warrants. We don't care. So who is this affecting? It's affecting the taxpayers, the people that constantly are paying for this over and over again. It's insanity. We're doing the same thing over and over again every 10 years. We do the same thing. And so it's insanity that we're doing. So we need to stop the 1011 and it's the unhoused people, we don't care about it because we're not going to pay the ticket. And if I go to jail, so what? I'm going to get some food, I'm going to get a shower and a place to sleep.
Yeah, and we know your boss, like many legislators, is under immense pressure to just have the problem disappear. But the only way to make the problem disappear is to housing.
Yes,
so, right?
Housing is it.
The only answer. And so
they say the highest things in California is homelessness and crime that they want to focus on, right? Well, you can't focus on it if yes, housing. Because encampments bring crime. Because the best thing for somebody, a criminal, a real criminal that's out there hurting people, they come to our encampments. They hide in our encampments. So when the police find them there at the encampment, they think that they're part of us, but they're not. So do encampments bring crime? They bring criminals to us because that's the best place to hide. Because I'm sorry, I look at all these people, I'm not telling nothing. I don't know nothing, I don't see nothing. That's how it is on the streets. So that's how it is. So we need to get the people in the encampments that want housing out so they don't have to deal with the criminal aspects that criminals do bring. And it's from the criminals out there. It's not that the encampments itself is criminalized, all the people are just criminals and want to go out. No. There's people in large encampments that have to fear the criminals that come in and bully us in our encampments. So they need to look at the bigger picture. Housing is just the answer to everything.
It really honestly is. It saves, it helps. Like once you're housed, all your stressors are just, I can guarantee you crime, everything will go down. You just house, help, and protect these vulnerable people. That's literally the answer.
The mental effect that it has on you, homelessness, will cause you to go insane. It will cause you to go insane. You can literally go insane out there in the streets. And now the state of California is going to have to pay for me to be somewhere. Now they're going to have to pay for all my medical expenses. So how much is that going to cost for one person for 1 year? Do that budget for one person for 1 year going clinically insane and having to be at these facilities, having to be on medication, having to see a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Add that up. That's just one person that you guys are going to be spending all that money on. You could have prevented that person from going insane.
I really appreciate.
Thank you so much for
all
your
your
I hope we drilled you.
Yeah. You got
Don't forget us.